Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to the consultation that we're having here this afternoon. As you know, the announcement has been made that the budget will be delivered on the 15th of July, which is normally held in the evening, this Friday, the 15th of July, Friday, which will be a Friday. Then by law, what actually happens is that once the budget is presented to Parliament, there's a week's break, and then there's a debate on the budget in the week following, and then God willing, the budget gets then approved. What we want to do today is essentially just take you through some of the critical economic points. What are the factors? As you know, that we've come out of a pandemic. What has been the implication of the pandemic? What kind of policies government has put in place to be able to help us mitigate the risks and the problems that arose out of the pandemic. And then we'll open the floor for any questions you may have, any contribution you'd like to make, and indeed any proposals you have for the budget. Should you have, after this consultation, any other burning issues you wish to raise, we've got an email address that you can send your views and ideas to. And we hope to close the submission process by early next week on Monday. Please send in your ideas or proposals that you may have by next week, Monday. Just for your information, we are here today, the first consultation one level is here. We had very strong requests from the rural areas in Vanuatu for consultations, which we've never had in those areas. So tomorrow morning we're going to Loa village, and then we're going up towards Tawake. And then on Saturday morning we are in Lambasa at the Civic Center. So what's actually happened? Obviously the COVID-19 had a devastating impact on the economy. As you can see, our economy had been growing, and I'll show you later some slides. It's been growing for 9 years. Then because of COVID, obviously we had a huge contraction in the value of our GDP. The actual GDP contracted. So our economy actually contracted by 17.2% in 2020, and then further contracted by about 4.1%, starting off with a lower base in 2021. We lost about $4.6 billion in GDP as a result of COVID. And we lost about $4 billion in foreign exchange from tourism earnings. As you know, that from tourism we get a lot of foreign exchange earnings. Nobody expected the borders to be shut down in the 21st century. USA, Britain, Australia, New Zealand till recently was all shut down. And so was Fiji as a result of COVID. When COVID started, nobody knew what would be the impact of COVID. Would it affect the younger people? Would it affect the older people? Would we all die off as flies, or how long would it be around for? So there's a lot of uncertainty around that. Government revenue declined by 50% essentially overnight. The tourists weren't coming. 110,000 people lost their jobs, and also people in the informal sector lost their jobs. Because it's not only about those in the formal sector. As I've mentioned on several occasions now during these consultations, that if you go out Nandi Airport, there's a lot of people outside the airport underneath the trees who sell boiled ebi, roti parcel, logo packs, mithai, all of those things. Their customers weren't the tourists. Their customers were the people who worked at the airport. Their customers were the people who worked at ATS, people who worked at Fiji Airways. Now, if all the operations in those businesses are shut down, these people also don't have a livelihood. Those women mainly who work there, they gain a livelihood. They no longer have any money. So it was a huge impact, in particular in Viti level. It was quite devastating for a lot of people. Government obviously then had to step in. Despite the fact that government revenue went down by half, despite the fact that our GDP contracted by $4.6 billion, we had to step in and find solutions. And we paid out, of course, huge amounts of money in respect of what we call unemployment support and other types of support. If you look over here, you can see the countries that are essentially what we call tourism-based countries, like Maldives, Antigua, Barbados, the Caribbean countries, Seychelles, etc. All the economies contracted quite dramatically because of the fact that they're services-based sector, or based countries. So Fiji was growing for 9 years. Some modest growth here, but nonetheless it was growing quite significantly. Over here, of course, we had Cyclone Winston. Cyclone Winston wiped off 1/3 of the value of our GDP in 36 hours. But despite that, the economy continued to grow. COVID came along with a huge contraction, as you can see, 17.2%. And last year was 4.1. Now with the borders opening up, we're going to have a growth by 11.3%. It's just been revised upwards by the Macroeconomic Committee to about 12.1 or 12.2%. It will grow by that much because the number of tourists actually are coming through. A lot more economic activities have started taking place. You would have seen tourists also coming in this part of the world in Savusavu. So we're expecting growth rates to be, quite significant. Obviously, we're starting off with a lower base. Fiji's never had 9 straight years of growth. We only had once 7 years straight growth post-independence. Soon after independence, we had 7 years of growth. We've never had 9 years of growth. So, these figures have just been revised, as I said, is in excess of 12% now. Now, every single person here in this room who's been vaccinated, none of you paid a single cent for it. The first dose, the second dose, the boosters. When we heard the word vaccine, we immediately got on to all our development partners. Our Prime Minister got on to all our bilateral partners. We started talking to the World Bank, the ADB, IMF, because we knew a country this small like Fiji, which is only about 900,000 people, that if you compare our orders would be for 1.8 million doses if everybody was going to get vaccinated. USA's population is nearly 300 million. So they would require 600 million doses. If you go to a pharmaceutical company, who's going to get into the line first? Obviously the people with the big orders. So despite the fact that we're a small country, because of the efforts, Fiji received 100,000 doses first, free from the Indians, then the Australians kicked in, then the Kiwis kicked in, and then of course the Americans kicked in, and as you can see now, the French have given us some vaccines. But not a single cent was paid by you or by government because of the diplomatic efforts. However, of course, we had to pay for the nurses and the doctors, the horse, the boat, the bus, the carrier, to take the vaccines to people in the rural and remote areas. And you pay overtime, etc. Now, we had a policy of no jab, no job policy. If you wanted to work, you had to be vaccinated. If you wanted to get a 360 in Viti level, you had to be vaccinated. Now, you may recall that last year, around about the first quarter of last year, there were a lot of cases in Fiji. Despite the fact that we had so many cases, by December we were able to open up our borders. Why? Because we took a decisive step and said to people, we have to get vaccinated. And because of that high rate of vaccination, we became one of the few countries in the world, in fact, out of all the developed countries in the world, the quickest rate of vaccination and the highest rate of vaccination in such a short period of time. That was because we had a goal to ensure that we can get out of this, and we actually had a goal to open up the borders. Now you can see the visitor arrivals. Before COVID, we were about 900,000 visitors. If COVID had not happened, we would have had over 1 million visitors today. You can see how it dropped. 2020, 147,000. Some of these are sort of returning Fijians, etc. Last year was 32,000 only. We're expecting now, this year, about 447,000 tourists. If you go down to, I don't know the statistics in Savusavu, but if you go down to Denrao in Nandi, most of the hotels are, vacancy rates are very low. They up to about 95% occupancy rates, very high. So all the people who used to work in the hotels are back at work, working 5 days, 6 days a week. They've got their livelihoods back. What is really interesting to see, where are the tourists coming from? So if you take cumulative from the month of December to May in 2019, and you compare it to 2022, we've got about 65% of what we had in that period in 2019. Where are most of these people coming from? Australia is the largest group of people who are coming, Australians. They're about 90% of what was in 2019. New Zealand is about 2/3. But New Zealand, as you know, only recently opened up its borders, allowing its citizens to go overseas and come back without having to go into quarantine. And the June and July bookings, in fact, are looking extremely good for us. Now, everybody is now talking at the moment about the cost of things. Everything is going up. And we need to understand why these things have gone up in price. Now, when you talk about inflation, inflation can be looked in two ways. One is what we call imported inflation. Inflation that essentially comes from goods that we buy from overseas, that we have absolutely no control over. The other one is obviously goods that is locally grown or locally produced. That's what we call domestic inflation. So over here in this graph, you can see the red line is the imported inflation. You can see how high it's going up. Domestic inflation is the green one. That's around there. You see domestic inflation, it went up really high there. Why? Because of things like cyclones. Yongona before Cyclone Winston in Suva was $85 a kilo. After Cyclone Winston, $185 a kilo. Because obviously a lot of Yongona plantations got damaged. Demand is still high, low supply. In Vitilevu, for example, when you have cyclones, long bean in the market is $2 a bundle before the cyclone. After the cyclone, it's $5. Bananas in Suva was, $2-3 half a dozen bananas. After Winston, went up to $7-8. Because all the banana trees fell down, people still don't eat bananas. The price will go up. That's what affects. Now, because of the pandemic, two things happened. Because of the pandemic, a lot of borders were shut down. So we had what we call supply chain issues. So things weren't being manufactured, factories had shut down, there were lockdowns, there were bubbles. They were like all of your phones. To operate the phone, you need a microchip. The microchip is made out of a particular metal that they get from the ground. Now, when the borders shut down, there's no mining of that metal. So microchips cannot be made. So there's a shortage of microchips, but people still want phones, people still want computers. So high demand, low supply. The second thing happened, China, as you know, is the largest manufacturer in the world. China, only until recently, still parts of China is still locked down. So the containers are not available. Shortage of supply of containers. A container before the pandemic from from New Zealand to Fiji cost $5,500. After the pandemic, it's $16,500. So there's a lot of supply chain issues, a lot of disruptions to manufacturing. The Russian war, of course, sent another blow. I'll show you a video very soon that will demonstrate to you, as a result of Russia invading Ukraine, what's the impact of that. But Ukraine is known as what we call the breadbasket of Europe. They grow a lot of wheat. They supply wheat to the Middle East, they supply wheat to North Africa, they supply wheat to some of the Asian countries. For us in Fiji, we are lucky because we have things like dalo and cassava and uto and bele and bhaji, bindi, bora, all of those things. But carbohydrate, we have actually dal and cassava. Right. Those countries, they don't have any other carbohydrate apart from bread. You know those round pita breads, they have the Middle Eastern breads. That's their carbohydrate. In some of these countries in the mornings at the moment, they fight over bread. The price of bread is astronomical. Somebody is telling me that in USA, a loaf of bread at the moment costs $8 a loaf, US dollars, because of the wheat supplies. In Fiji at the moment, there are only two companies that make flour. Punja and Sons in Navutu in Latoka and FMF in Walube in Suva. They traditionally buy their wheat from Australia, they bring it to Fiji, they grind it, put some vitamins, and you get flour. So everybody's roti, purini, bambakau, bread, pani keke, scones, cake, all of these things. You need flour. But we price control it. It's an item that everybody buys. So when Punja and Sons say, for example, if they buy, say, wheat at $300 a ton from Australia, they'll bring it to Fiji, they'll grind it. Before they sell the flour that they make, before they sell it to the supermarkets, because they don't sell it to you directly, you can't turn up to the factory and buy the flour. You have to go to the supermarket. So before they sell it, they have to go to the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission. They'll say, look, I bought it at $300 a ton, this is my labor cost, my electricity cost, my storage cost. They'll say, okay, you can make only this much margin. Then at that margin, they sell it to the supermarket. then Max Value or Shop and Save, before they sell it to you, then they'll go to FCCC. And they say, look, I'm renting a shop in Savusavu, that's my rental cost, my labor cost, my electricity cost. They'll say, okay, you can make only this much margin, this is what you sell to the tourists. People in Vanuatu will say, look, it's coming from Vitilevu, the freight cost they'll add to it too. So that's how you get the margin, it's still price control. But of course, if tomorrow Australia puts up the price of wheat from $300 a ton to $400 a ton, the price will go up. Still price control, but the price will go up. So that's, obviously the impact. The other major, commodity that's had a huge impact globally, not just in Fiji, but is the price of oil, fuel. Very few people knew this, but Russia is the third largest producer of oil. Russia, in fact, has a direct gas pipeline to Germany on land. This is what they call cooking gas. It's supplied to them. Now, America has put a trade ban. You can't trade with Russia because they want to punish them for invading Ukraine. There's a shortage of gas. Other countries are extracting gas, like Qatar and various other places, but the supply is less, high demand. Same thing with oil. So those dynamics have affected us. So obviously, the bus companies in Fiji will say, hey, I used to pay, only say $1.50 a litre. Now I'm paying $3.20 a litre or $3 a litre. If you don't put up the bus fare, I can't run my bus. You put up the bus fare. That's how it has an impact on us domestically. People who do trucking business, people who bring the food from Vitilevu to Vanuatu, they bring it on the trucks. Price of fuel has gone up. Price of fuel for the shipping companies have gone up. To bring the trucks, Notovi, Nabuwalu, Lambasa, price will go up. That's the impact of fuel. That's for us one of the risks. We're expecting the freight cost to come down by September, October when China opens up a lot more freights will be available. A lot more containers will be available. We don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine and Russia, completely out of our control. God willing, it does not expand to other countries. The other day, some Russian general is threatening to invade another European country. We don't know what's going to happen. So that's something that we have to be prepared for. That's why you need stability in policies. You need to know which way we are going. You have to have a game plan around it. Let me show you this video. This is from the World Economic Forum.
Previously, we were buying the packet 140. For now, it is 180. The salad, we used to buy around 180 per liter, but for now, 300 shillings. It's really tough for us.
Ukraine grows enough food to feed 400 million people on planet Earth. So when the farmers on the battlefields aren't planting or aren't harvesting, what impact do you think that's going to have? You've got a catastrophe knocking and looming on the door for the fall. That will be not a price issue, but a supply issue, availability of food for people around the world, and that will be a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe.
So you can see what happened as a result, or what's happening as a result of the war in Ukraine. There's a huge supply issue, there's a huge impact on pricing, and obviously, as I said, not many people realize what actually was going on in Ukraine and how of an impact it does have. So, I want to show you another video, and that is about what's actually happening in Sri Lanka. A lot of people are saying, oh, Fiji is like Sri Lanka. It's far from it. But over there, that video is going to demonstrate to you that when government does not have some strategic policies put in place, it can have a huge impact on things like food supply, your ability to buy things. And I'll just give you an example. Everything all of the clothes that all of you are wearing, it may be sewn in Fiji, but the fabric comes from overseas. Everything around you comes from overseas. These tiles come from overseas. The cars outside come from overseas. The flour, onion, garlic, potato, everything comes from overseas. These fans come from overseas. The mic comes from overseas. So when we buy things from overseas, we don't buy it in Fijian dollars. We need US dollars. You need Japanese yen. That's what you call foreign currency. How do we get foreign currency? Is when tourists come to Fiji, they bring in the US dollars, Australian dollars, New Zealand dollars, euros, pounds. That's how we build our foreign currency. How else do we get it? When we export things. When we sell yangona to USA, when we sell dalo, cassava, bhaji, bhindi, bora, all of these things. We're selling now at the moment, a lot of ginger, turmeric, Fiji water, other waters that are being sold. That brings money from overseas. That's how you build your foreign reserves. Now, when the economy was shut down because of COVID-19, one of the first things we realized was that it could have a huge impact on our foreign currency reserves. Now, the International Monetary Fund says that each country should have at least enough foreign currency to trade for about 3 months. That's what you call the minimum that you should have. And I'll show you how much money we have. So what we did, all governments in the world borrow money. But what we did, normally in Fiji, when we borrow about 70% of our debt from domestically, from Fiji, and 30% from overseas, plus or minus 5%. This time around, we borrowed more from overseas. Why? Because we get more foreign currency coming in. So our foreign currency reserve is quite high. Unfortunately, some countries did not do that. And you can see in the next video what was the impact of that.
Helping put food on the table. Community kitchens like this are starting up around Sri Lanka as people struggle with its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. Food inflation has hit nearly 60%, and many people are finding it difficult to cope.
Most of these community who are coming today or been coming are surviving with 2 meals. So we are giving them the responsibility of surviving for 1 meal, and we are saying, right, we will support you with 1 meal, but a good healthy meal.
Few now get to eat this well.
It's very difficult. We rarely get food like this. Only my husband is working, but what he earns for a day is not enough to feed the 3 of us now.
Tax cuts 3 years ago slashed government revenue by more than $2 billion. The tourism industry was then damaged by the Easter bombings and the pandemic. Now there is no money to import fuel, medicine, cooking gas or food.
Right now, actually, our main focuses are on food banks, on community kitchens, and again, long to medium term community gardens and home gardens, because we can give rations, but it's very short term.
The government is appealing for help.
We urgently require the assistance of our friends in the international community to ensure that our immediate needs in terms of the importation of essential medicines, food supply, and fuel army.
India and China have sent food and medicine in recent days. The opposition says the government has weakened the economy through populist policies and mismanagement. A nationwide campaign dubbed Gota Go Home has been running for 2 months, calling on the president to resign. The government is seeking a loan package from the International Monetary Fund or IMF. Critics say it'll take too long, even if agreed, and people need action now.
Tens of thousands of Sri Lankans are going hungry amid the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Community kitchens like this can only feed a fraction of them. Minal Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
So if you look at inflation, it's going up everywhere in the world. American inflation is about 8.5%. We are sitting at about 5 at the moment. Japan has got the lowest inflation rate. In Europe, the Eurozone is 7.4, Australia is about 5.1, New Zealand is higher than Australia and Fiji, 6.9, and United Kingdom is 9.1. They expect it to go even higher. So if you look over here, this tells you the price of commodity, the food price index, the cereals, meat price index, oil, you can see again, dairy price index, sugar. Sugar is basically not that high. I wish it was higher, we get more money for our sugar. But you can see all the other ones are actually quite high. So it's a global phenomena and it's affecting all the countries in the world. Different countries obviously have different ways of dealing with it. And for us as a small island developing state, we have to be able to ensure that we have a good strategy in place, and indeed we put a strategy in place. We've been anticipating this, as you know, because of COVID, and then of course nobody knew about the Russia-Ukraine war. Before even the Russia-Ukraine war, you know, in Fiji, for the sugarcane farmer, the bag of fertilizer cost $45.65 before the COVID. The farmer pays $20, government pays $25.65 on their behalf. We subsidize. Before the Russia-Ukraine war, the price landed on my desk at $80 a bag. It jumped from $45.65 to $80. Farmer doesn't want to pay anything more than $20, so guess who's paying the $60? We have to pay the $60. So if you see in the revised budget, we had to increase more funding for the subsidization of fertilizer. So we of course zero-rated VAT. So as you know, in the revised budget, all these items here, you don't pay VAT anymore. If we did not remove VAT, you'd be paying 9% more. But look at these things. Apart from sugar, flour comes from overseas, wheat, rice, most of it comes from overseas. You have some locally grown rice in Vanuatu. A lot of canned fish comes from overseas. Cooking completely overseas. Potatoes not grown in Fiji. Onions not grown in Fiji. Garlic not grown in Fiji. Baby milk from overseas. Powdered milk from overseas. Some liquid Fijian milk, but most of it comes from overseas. Dal overseas. Tea overseas. Salt overseas. Soap, some is made here, but the raw ingredients comes from overseas. Soap powder, toilet paper, sanitary pads for women, toothpaste, kerosene, cooking gas. So when we did this list, we could have, just done 5-6 items. But we know exactly what are the everyday items. Everybody hopefully has a bath every day. You need soap, right? You need to brush your teeth with toothpaste. You need toilet paper. You need sanitary pads. All of these, they are everyday items. Nobody cooks a curry without garlic and onion. Right? You put garlic even in a lolo, in the miti. You put, onions. So all these things actually have an everyday impact on your grocery basket. Now, so what did we do? We have to make sure that there's what we call macroeconomic stability, that the financial system is stable. So even though 110,000 people lost their jobs, none of the banks have shut down. Even though the economy shrunk significantly by 72%, 17.2%, it did not affect our financial system. The Fijian dollar was not devalued. Most countries, the dollar got devalued. But a lot of people don't understand the power of not having the dollar devalued. Can you imagine a country that imports so many things, if the dollar got devalued? The dollar got devalued, the price of things would have gone even higher. You would have to pay more Fijian dollars to buy the same product. So we provided $50 million in support. So people in Vitilevu, for example, got the 360, the 2 rounds of 50, the $90. People living in Vanuatu and also Vitilevu and anywhere in Fiji who were formally engaged. So if somebody was a waiter or waitress, was working at one of the resorts here, they became unemployed, they could withdraw their funds from the general account of FNPF. If their money ran out, we gave $225 a fortnight to all of those people. Only, over 1 year. I'll show you how much it cost us. So even though banks had provisioning of over $100 million, the banks are still doing okay. Because we maintain what we call macroeconomic stability. A lot of people, for example, who may have been working at one of the resorts, they may have had a $2,000 loan, $2,500 loan. Now they could not pay it. They're no longer working. So the banks did what we call provisioning. Over $100 million of provisioning. Essentially saying they will not get it back. So we reduced, EKL departure tax was reduced from $200 to $100. No more stamp duties. You want to start up a business, you don't no longer require a business license, unless, for example, you are, selling food. Then you need the Ministry of Health people to inspect the food, etc. We helped businesses. The FNPF was reduced from 10.8 to 5.5. Then it's gone up to 6.6. We offered $200 million loans, in concessional loans, so people could apply. And we announced that in last year's budget, if you got that loan, first 2 years you don't do any repayments. We pay the interest rate on your behalf to any of the banks that you got the loan from. You don't do any principal payments. And of course, those items were reduced on VAT. Now, just to, we've heard a lot of people in Fiji, they've become experts on debt overnight. Both Bari Karza, Selemunan Dinau, but they don't understand it. It's just a gimmick, really. Let's compare ourselves to other countries. Look at New Zealand, a country that traditionally had low debt levels. Before the pandemic, 28% debt to GDP ratio. Now, it's 52%, almost doubled, even a country like New Zealand. Australia went up from 42% to 62%. Malaysia, 56 to 71. Fiji, 46% to 80%. Look at other countries, Bahamas, it's another tourism-driven country, went from 62 to 103%. Mauritius, 66 to 101. St. Lucia, again, very tourism-driven country. The debt to GDP ratios increased significantly. Of course, USA and them are in a completely different league. Even before the pandemic, the debt to GDP ratio is 107%. Japan, 257%. But nobody says that those countries are in trouble. Only people in Fiji start saying that Fiji is in trouble. I'll show you the debt. If you'll see over here, just to explain, our debt to GDP ratio is coming down. Even though our value of the debt went up, debt to GDP ratio is coming down. Why? Because our economic pie grew. Before, the thinking was that this is the size of the pie. If I want to give to him, I have to take it from him to give it to him. But nobody thought about making the pie bigger so more people can get. Very basic way of looking at the financial system, the economic system. That's what we've been doing. Basically what that says is this gentleman here, if say he has $100, he goes and borrows $20. You say his debt to GDP ratio is 20%. $20 of $100, right? He borrows $50. Double. But he has $500. So even though he's borrowed $50 and he's borrowed only $20, but because he's making $500, you say debt to GDP ratio is only 10%. 50 is only 10% of 500. So as you become richer, your ability to borrow increases. I know a lot of people in Vanuatu want tahsil roads. A lot of people in the interior want connection to electricity, as they should have electricity. They want connectivity to water. They want connectivity to street lights. They want good schools. The schools don't have internet. If a government is going to borrow money to connect people to electricity, to give people water, to build better sewage systems, there's nothing wrong with borrowing that money, because it builds the capacity of people. A person who today catches fish where they don't have electricity, he cannot keep the fish for a long time. But the moment you connect them to electricity, they can buy a fridge, a refrigerator, a cooler, they can keep the fish for longer. They can then sell the fish and make more money. So increasing the productive capacity of that person or that individual area. So that's the way, that's what we've been doing. Of course, over here, we had Cyclone Winston. You can see it went up. This is when all the payments were made. Cyclone Winston, we spent $500 million in fixing up things. Over $200 million only in schools. As you know, most schools in Fiji, they're not owned by government. They may be owned by the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, the Sanatan Dharam, the Muslim League, the Seventh Day, the community school. But when the school gets damaged by a cyclone, government builds it. Teachers' quarters get damaged, government builds it. When the Irish crossing goes, the bridge goes, government builds it. We paid out $125 million in help for homes in Cyclone Winston. You know, people got $7,000, $3,000, $1,500. $110 million in Josie, Kenny, and Gita. If your house got damaged, you got $1,000 paid out. So all of those things, despite that, we still obviously, our debt to GDP ratio came down. Now let's look at the debt, the dollar value of the debt. Compare Fiji to other countries, tourism countries. Total debt of Bahamas is $11.4 billion. This is in US dollars. $11.4 billion. Approximately 23 million Fijian dollars. 23 billion dollars, Fijian dollars. Mauritius, 11.2 billion US dollars, which is about 22 billion dollars, Fijian dollars. Barbados, Maldives, Fiji is 3.7 billion dollars, which is about, say, 8 billion Fijian dollars. These people, 22 billion Fijian dollars. These are all essentially, like I said, tourism-based countries. And that's where we sit, the dollar value. Look at other countries. This is in trillion dollars. They're in a different league altogether. So the debt of India is 2.8 trillion US dollars. Debt of USA is 30.5 trillion dollars. Not billion, trillion. Japan, $11 trillion. New Zealand is about $0.1 trillion. Australia is $1 trillion debt. Nobody says that these countries are in trouble. The people who talk about debt in Fiji. You see, when you look at debt, you must understand this. Two questions you have to ask. Why are you borrowing money? If we, for example, as a government decide to borrow money to build a big convention center on top of that hill, and we say that any minister comes, they stay there. And it costs us, say, $50 million to build it. That's stupid use of money. You don't borrow money to build something that's not going to be used. But if you're going to borrow money, like I said, to connect people to electricity, to build schools, build a hospital, that's what you call good use of money. It increases the productive capacity of the country. If during a pandemic, you're going to borrow money to make sure that people have food on the table, they don't go hungry, they don't fall into poverty, that's good use of money. That's number one. The second thing is what you're going to look at when you borrow money is how much is that money going to cost you, which is normally interest rate. If he goes and borrows money, $100,000 from BSP, BSP says, no problem, I'll give it to you, pay us back in 3 years' time, 15% interest rate. He goes and borrows money from Home Finance. Only Fijian bank we have now, 100% Fijian loan. They said, no problem. We'll give you $100,000, you give 30 years to pay back the loan, 1% interest rate. If you look at both of them got $100,000 debt. Make sure they're both the same. They're not. Because he is going to get high blood pressure. He has to pay back the debt in 3 years' time, 15% interest rate. His business is going to start. He must make sure that he earns enough money, not just to, first of all, you think about how we're going to do the repayment. Then whatever is left, then he lives off that. He's relaxed mode. 1% interest rate, 30 years to pay, no problem. That's what you have to look at. So you have to look at whether the country has the ability to pay, whether it's going to affect your cash flow. Some of you are business people. You know about cash flow. Cash flow is how much money you get and how much money is already committed from that. And we have very good cash flow from that perspective. We have the ability to pay off our debts, do the repayments. I just put that slide in because I want people to understand when we talk about debt, these are the dynamics at play. I talked to you about foreign reserves earlier on. This is the amount or the value of the foreign reserves we have. This line here tells you how much trading you can do with it. See over here, this says $1.3 billion we had in 2010, 4.7. You could do 4.7 months worth of trading. 4.7 months worth of trading. Sometimes, even though the value of the foreign reserve goes high, like over here, it's $2 billion, but you could trade only for 4.5 months. Why? Because the economy was moving really fast. A lot of construction is going on, we're importing a lot of things. A lot of houses are being built, a lot of hotels are being built. You need more things, you need tiles, you need all this stuff from overseas. So there's a high demand, high pressure on your foreign reserves. When the economy slows down, people will buy less. So over here, you see how our foreign reserves kept on going up. Our economy is growing, a lot of exports. Then of course COVID came along and we borrowed more from offshore. So our foreign reserves went high, $3.2 billion. 9.9 months worth of trading, 8.9 months of trading. Why? Because nobody is buying stuff. Nobody is doing construction. But as the economy picks up, you can see with $3 billion, you got 8.4 months worth of trading to do. So you're in a good space as far as that is concerned. You saw in the Sri Lankan video, they don't have this. That's why they don't have enough money to buy medicine from overseas. See all the long queues outside the service station, they don't have enough money to buy fuel. In Fiji, the 3 fuel companies, they buy all the fuel from Singapore. They have to pay it in US dollars. Singapore is one of the largest refineries in this part of the world. So they buy it from there. Now, this other thing is about liquidity. Liquidity basically means how much money there is in the banking system. So when we borrowed more from offshore, it means new money came in. So we anticipated that we need to have high levels of liquidity because when the economy will start moving again, people will want money. Start their home construction, start building buildings. So we need the cost of the money to come down. When there's more money in the banks, the interest rate will come down. See, because banks don't make money, banks don't say, oh, I got $2 billion in my account. That for them is not success. For them what is success is, how much money have I lent? Because they make money from lending people money. The profit is interest. So you're going to put a term deposit, when there's plenty of money in the bank, you're going to put a term deposit for 2 years, they'll pay you 1.5% interest rate, for example. Then they use your money and lend it to somebody at 5 or 6%. That's how they make money. So when there's a lot of money, a lot more competition, you'll see the interest rates coming down. You see? Less liquidity, interest rate of 7.4%. As liquidity gets higher, interest rates come down. Should come down more actually. So, we've come out of the COVID-19 crisis. The recovery of tourism sector is critically important. We have been diversifying our economy, even before the pandemic. There's one sector that grew jobs during the COVID time, which is the Bpo sector. Bpo is business processing outsourcing, which essentially means you may be calling up your bank. I live in Sydney and I call my bank branch to ask about my account. There's a Fijian person answering the phone call in Suva or Nadi or somewhere else. Because it's cheaper for them to have somebody in Fiji answer the phone call than for an Australian to answer the phone call in Australia. That's what you call outsourcing. There are now bookkeeping services being done in Fiji. There is now, for example, insurance claim forms. Insurance claims are being processed by Fijians. 3,000 new jobs during that period. We're looking at more. We gave in this recent budget $250,000 to the Bpo Council to get more jobs, to create more jobs for us. Most of the people who get employed are between the ages of 19 and 33 in this sector. We have also looking at how we can encourage BPOs to come to Vanuatu. We currently are considering what to do. As you know now, you got the submarine cable that's landed here in Savusavu. TFL is looking at putting a fiber optic cable from Savusavu to Lamasa, increase the internet speed. So we want more businesses to come to Vanuatu. We want Vanuatu people to stay in Vanuatu. We want to send more Viti level people to Vanuatu too. You have a lot of land, a lot of opportunities here. That's what we want to do. As you know, that with the non-renewal of leases, in particular in Madhuwata area, 50% of sugarcane production went down in Vanuatu. So the economy became smaller. All those people are now living as squatters in the Suvarnasori corridor. That's why whenever you go to a football match, you only see only Lambasa flags. All those people are there. A lot of them are living, on near sewer pipes. A lot of people are living in gullies, in tin shacks, etc. Driving taxis, but they don't have access to land. So there's a lot of land here. You can lease land. The Itoke landowners can make money. We've got a lot of initiatives to help Itoke people develop land, where we actually do the development for them if they want to do subdivisions. So those are the kind of policy we put in place. We obviously, there are two things that we don't have any control over. One, of course, is climate change. Some of you are old enough to know Cyclone Bibi. I remember Cyclone Bibi, I was 7 years old in 1972. After Cyclone Bibi, it was a big cyclone. After Cyclone Bibi, the next cyclone that came was 10 years later. Now, every cyclone season we get about 3. If we don't get 3, you think it's really good, or you think something's wrong. This year we had only 1 cyclone, but if you go to Vitilevu, the highway between Nandi and Singatoka and in Kambisi, the entire highway got washed away. Big hole in the ground. Semo, Nawai, 1 lane of the highway went. You've seen landslides here too. So those costs are what we call unanticipated costs. When those things happen, obviously we have to get the money from somewhere else. So some program, we may have a program, for example, to tahsil a particular road. But if tomorrow the highway gets washed away between Savusavu and Lambasa, we'll divert that money from there to do that, because that's more important. In the same way, because of COVID, before COVID, we had planned to do a lot of rural electrification. But we had to put that on hold because we had to, make sure we paid more unemployment benefit. That's more important. So we have to put some certain things on hold. That's one risk. The other risk, of course, is for us, nobody knows at the moment what's going to happen in Russia, Ukraine. So obviously have an impact on the price of things globally, but we don't know how long it's going to last. God forbid that it extends to other countries in Europe, it will completely change the ballgame. Nobody knows. If it ends, it'll be great. More wheat will come into the market, etc. to change the dynamics again. So it's in everybody's interest to make sure that we keep up this momentum of growing the economy. Our job as a government to make sure we create the right environment for the private sector, make sure the private sector is comfortable, we create the right conditions for them so they can continue to invest. When I talk about private sector, I don't just mean, large businesses. I mean individuals. A lot of Fijians who are living overseas, because we now have dual citizenship, a lot of them are coming back, building homes, those kind of things where people can rent out. There are other people getting small businesses. So individual Fijians, we want to make them encourage them to come back home to invest. Right from those people, right to those other people, the big businesses, and encourage more jobs too. Today in Fiji, 70% of the population is below the age of 40. 65% of the population is below the age of 35. All of you over the age of 40, you're in the minority. So, when you have a young population, what does it mean? Put simply, we'll get more babies quickly. It's a fact. Country like Japan and Australia, they have what we call an aging population. The health policies, the economic policies, the fiscal policies are more catered towards looking after the elderly people. You go to Japan, there's a 70-year-old working at the supermarket, packing your groceries, pushing the trolleys. Not enough young people. In Fiji, it's the other way around. So you have to anticipate. When we develop policy, when we do the budget, we don't just do a budget just for next year. We have to plan, say what's going to happen in 10 years' time. What can we do now that in 10 years' time we'll be in a good position? Those are the kind of things we do. So you have to look at demographics, the aging population or very young population. And that's how we also develop, the budgets. I mean, I mentioned most of this before. We continue obviously to, look at public-private partnership. As you know that we've, Lotoka Hospital now is being run by Aspen Medical, which is an Australian company. They've got a partnership with FNPF. We are told by July, as we've been informed, we should have our first open heart surgery. At the moment, if any one of us has a heart attack, you have to do open heart surgery, which means cutting your chest, lifting up the ribs, and doing a bypass. No Fijian doctor can do that, which is really quite sad in the 21st century. There were no investments made in that area. But God willing, once this thing starts in July, that will be made available. It also means that our people will stop going overseas for medical treatment, for doing heart surgeries. Well, that also means that we'll save money because we won't be sending our money overseas. Our foreign reserves won't get affected. But it also means that a lot of all the other Pacific Island countries don't have that facility. They will come to Fiji to use our hospital. They'll pay the full fees. So we get their foreign currency coming in. They may stay at the hotel. We get money that way too. Our doctors and nurses will get trained. As part of the condition, they have to build a new wing at the Lautoka Hospital, and in that new wing they have to build an operating theatre, what we call a learning operating theatre, so our doctors can watch and learn, and God willing in a few years' time, we have Fijian doctors who can do the same procedure. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. The other thing, of course, is that the reason why I put in Lautoka, because it's very close to Nadi International Airport. We have literally thousands of Fijians, mainly women, who work in USA, in California mainly, providing aged care services. Our people are very good at looking after kids and elderly people. So some of these people, they get paid $150 a day, just looking after elderly people, bathing them, changing their clothes, whatever it is, giving them medicine on time. So the reason why we had that there is because we provided incentives. We want to build retirement homes in Fiji. So during winter time, they come and stay here. They rent those buildings or they buy those apartments, and our people will get jobs. It's a strategic decision to have it in the West. And obviously the Western people are a lot more nicer and friendlier. One of the things that's happened, as I mentioned, you see, in last year, we had the Bpo sector grew. In the agriculture sector, we saw kava, ginger, and turmeric. Turmeric, haldi. Huge demand for it now, overseas. With people up in Singatoka Valley, because we've got a lot of, turmeric growing in the wild. They're digging that up. There's some people who've got now turmeric farms now. So this is highly in demand. In particular after COVID, everybody's become health conscious. Making ginger juice, turmeric juice, seijan, moringa, those things, that's what they're doing. There's a challenge for us too. If you look in the papers recently, they have been recruiting agencies from Australia. They've been advertising in Fiji. They're willing to pay $80,000 to $120,000 for chefs with more than 3 years experience. There's a shortage of chefs in Australia. There's a shortage of accountants in Australia. They're taking a lot of our accountants. There's a shortage of teachers in certain areas, math, science, physics. So they want teachers to go and teach in the deep rural areas. We pay very high levels of allowances there. So they're poaching our people. In New Zealand last week there was an article that there's a shortage of about 60,000 people in the hospitality sector. Not enough people want to do waitressing or work in in hotels and restaurants. So they might start taking our people. What does that mean for us? If a lot of our people go overseas, who will do the waitressing job here? If our chefs go overseas, we may need to get people from overseas to take their position because we have to run our hotels. So a lot of the dynamics are changing. You saw in the Christchurch earthquake, after the Christchurch earthquake, there was a huge rebuild program. A lot of our people as carpenters and joiners went there. I just talked to somebody the other day, they're sending a group of people to do slaughtering in the abattoirs. In New Zealand, they need people from Fiji. So a lot of people will move. So it has a huge impact on us. So we are, like, for example, at the moment talking to the Fijian National University, how we can provide incentives for our young people to get trade skills. Not everybody wants to become an academic. Some people may be very good in carpentry, joinery, plumber maker, forklift driver, whatever it is. We need to give them those skill sets. Some, of course, may get the skill sets, they may work for a few years, and they might get taken away. But we need to make sure that we look after our economy first. So, we, as part of the budget, these are things I can tell you, we'll continue to invest in education. As you know, education is completely free. Even though the pandemic had a huge impact on government revenue, we said we're not going to stop free education. Right from early childhood all the way to year 30. We still have tails and toppers, there's some changes made, but we brought back the marks down to make sure more people get it. Health services, of course, infrastructure development, we're still doing that. We did not stop infrastructure development. Some projects were held back just so we can live within our means, but others obviously continue. Water, roads, bridges, jetties. Connectivity is important. As you know that earlier on this year we were here. We went to, there's 40 sites in Vanuatu, we connected people to internet. I went up, Waingunnu Bay Area, where there's schools that got no internet. So we connected them to internet, the school, if there's a village nearby, we Wi-Fi the school compound. So the villagers can come into the school compound and get connectivity via WhatsApp, email. Those are the things that's really important for us, because that's what you call true inclusiveness. No point only having those services in the towns and cities. The people, the school kids in the rural areas need those services too. That's how you create equality. Minimum wage, as you know, has gone up to $4. It'll go up to completely to $4 by January of next year. Every quarter it increases up to January of next year. It has an impact on other job skill sets where they have to go up also. We remove the 20 cents fuel levy and of course the restructure. So as I said, if you have any submissions to make, you can email that to us. I'm afraid if you send it by post, it may arrive too late. You can email it, and of course, you can hand deliver it. You can go to this website. You'll find all of the information and more information than what I've just mentioned to you. All of these things, they're all available on the website. The state of the economy, etc. It's all available by law. We have to publish it. One last point I wanted to mention. Last year, when we during COVID, we found that a lot of people are going to, who could not afford to go to a private doctor, were going to the health center or to the public hospital because they had maybe a headache or maybe they cut their hand. And we did not want them to go and queue up the public health system. So we said to the private doctors, those of you who want to participate in this, please come forward. But 17 medical outlets did. There's a bit of story behind it, but eventually 17 did. So if you went and saw the doctor, they gave you an injection, they saw you, they did the dressing, we paid for it. We paid for the doctor's fees also. We didn't pay a single cent.
Just a lump sum.
Sorry?
If I say a doctor, hospital, the doctor,
you don't pay the doctor, if you send us the invoice, we pay. Yeah, which doctor? In Savusavu? No, but Savusavu just started, I'll tell you. Savusavu was not on the scheme before. Only recently, we called for expressive interest again. So now there are 43 doctors. In the scheme, Savusavu is not there. But now, Savusavu is there with only one doctor. And that doctor's name is, let me look for it. Savusavu Medical Center, Dr. Ishaq Mohammed. So now, if you go and see Dr. Ishaq, nebulizer, kidney test, liver test, blood test, cholesterol, all of that. He has an ECG machine. All of that, you get that done, you don't pay a single cent, we'll pay them directly. So we'd like to thank all those doctors who participated. Of course, in some towns, more doctors have applied. They've given us very good pricing. So for example, we have in Suva, we have about 7 of them, 7 outlets. In, no, actually more than that, sorry. There's about Suva, Nakasi, or Nandera, all those places. There's about 20, there's 20, there's 15. Korobo got 1 doctor, Navua 1, Singatoga there's 3, Nandi there's quite a few, 8 outlets. And when I say 8 outlets, some of these places they have like, in one outlet there's 4 doctors. Lotoka 3, Ba there's about 2, 4, 6. Tabua 1, Lambasa 1, Savusavu 1. So we've now expanded the services. So those doctors, you can get all of that done. We've also got deals now with or agreements with the labs. So they charge a lower rate. So for example, if you go to see Dr. Ishaq, what we want to do is not just expand the services, but we want to keep track of people's health. So if you go and see him, assuming you got a flu, so you say, look, well, let me just test your sugar. And let me check your blood pressure. 2 months later, you go and see him, he'll do the same thing. Hey, your sugar has gone high. You change your lifestyle now. A lot of people will find who normally go to the public health system, they won't go to the public health system until they get really sick. So somebody's got a cut on the toe, it won't heal for 2 months. Then they'll go, they say, oh, your sugar is 20, we have to cut your toe off. That's what's happening. So we want what we call preventative healthcare. So you develop a relationship. In Savusavu, obviously you've got only one doctor that you can go to. But that's what we're trying to do. It helps in the productive capacity of the country. It provides also a particular service. We also advertise for expression of interest for dentists. We said that for dentists, if we get the right price, you can go and consult the dentist. You can do your filling, permanent filling, temporary filling, and tooth extraction. We'll pay for it also. Unfortunately, nobody from Vanuatu got through. Nobody applied actually from Vanuatu. None of the dentists from Vanuatu applied. All the 4 or 5 are from Suva. 4 from Suva. There was one from Lautoka who got across, but he's overseas. He comes back in November, and then we start with him. So we want more and more people to join. Obviously, it makes your life easier also. So you have the options. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's. Oh, the other thing, I've got one last slide. I thought I would show that to you about education. Every year we allocate $700 million for the education sector now. Part of that is also what we call tails and toppers. So we pay, this is budget of $156.5 million. Now remember, every school in Fiji, unless it's completely private, so all the teachers' salaries we pay. So, you know, the school in Nampuka is a Catholic school. We pay all the teachers' salaries. All the grants are given to all the schools, free education. So that's about all of that combined with the university grants that we give, $700 million. So we also now pay for what we call the TVET courses. You know, they have the TVET courses, do shipbuilding, carpentry. They go out to the villages and teach people those things. That's also paid for through Fiji National University. We had taken off the toppers from the MBBS, from medicine, but we've reinstated that now under the revised budget. Now remember, as a parent, if your child has got TELS, that's a loan. When your child finishes the university, they don't have to start paying the loan immediately. They only start paying once they get a job. And they take off only a small amount of the money. But we've come up with some new schemes announced last year that if you pay off 50% of your loan within 2 or 3 years, we forgive the other 50%. You don't have to pay. So we've got various mechanisms to do that. The toppers is different. Toppers is where you don't pay us back a single cent. We pay for everything. But we need you to work in Fiji for a period of time. So if you're a topper and you've done medicine, you have to work in Fiji for 8 years. Doesn't matter whether they work for the government or whether they work in the private sector, but you have to work in Fiji because we've invested in you. We want you to pay back by working. A lot of the toppers we have allocation is more for like things like foresters, town planners, marine scientists, engineers, those technical areas. We have a shortage of people in those areas. We don't give toppers for lawyers, too many lawyers. So we look at the need of the country. That's how we allocate the toppers. In Australia, I think last week before last, you would have seen the news. In Melbourne, the waiting time at a hospital was 24 hours. In ABC News, I don't know. Not enough nurses. So guess what's going to happen? They'll start trying to poach our nurses. If they do, some nurses are in the Middle East, in UAE. Like for example, UK, they're bringing nurses from India now to go and work in UK. From Philippines and various other places. So we can anticipate what's going to happen is that they'll start taking our nurses. So we have to train more of our nurses. So we have to, probably give more scholarships. So more nurses get trained. So those are the things that when we're looking at a budget, it's not only about the money per se, but it's about the strategic decisions you have to make. You have to look at you have to have a foresight to plan what's going to happen in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. Okay, so I'll stop talking now. If you can please feel free to ask any question, any contributions to make. Like I said, if you want to make submissions, you can email that to us later on. Thank you for coming this afternoon. Minaka, thanks.
Can I ask some questions?
Sure. Somebody to the mic there.
Yeah, ask about the COVID-19 recovery loan. It was introduced last year, September, I think. I'm the one who applied for the loan. I'm a qualified chef and also a farmer. And I want to do a roadside business, like a street food, along the road. I applied and they did not come back to me. What they gave me is the license, a catering license. Then I didn't want the license, I want the money to run with the license. Then that's the end of the road. Not even a text message or anything sent to me, or not only me, I speak to a lot of people. I ask the people in Suva, the FTP, through the FTP. Then they refer me to Savusavu. I asked the guy in Savusavu and said, all the application has been declined. I said, why? Because some people abuse the system. I say, how come abuse? It's just run for 1.5 years. Did you make a survey for everybody that done the application so we can know it's a problem there? Even though there's no money or something, I don't know, but at least come back to the people. We are the people. We are the ones can, from the government. I vote this government all the time in my life. Till today, I'm 62. I'm a farmer, and I'm still asking how come that, done is nothing come back to the people. I saw some parcel people selling in market everywhere. Nothing came back to us. He said, "No way, we're gonna wait a long way." No, people waiting, and election coming up. We're gonna elect this government again. I'm not a politician. I'm just saying, what happens there? It's not right to me because we are waiting. I wait for 3 months. Then Monday they send me an email saying that if you want to pay your license 1 year, or 5 years, or 3 years, 7 years, 10 years. I say, my license expires in October, this October. How can I run a business without the money? And that's, that's what I was thinking all along, but this is the right time to bring it up. Because you the people, running the government. That's why I want to ask. And also, I'm a farmer, I'm leasing a land here, 15 acres, just 15 acres. From 2019 till today, I spent over 120,000 spending on my 2 sisters from overseas helping me, sending in the money every week. I've got 3 farmers there who are doing farming every day. $350 a week, I pay them. I ask agriculture, they don't have anything to give me to plant. Only they give me the seed and the pineapple tops. I plant 3,000 pineapple tops. And I ask anything else, can you help me? They say, okay, you have to write a letter. I wrote a letter last year. Till today, I haven't received anything from them. And I'm still waiting. I want to do electricity along the way to my farm. I make my room. I spend $4,000. I pay for the tenant over $150,000 to tell you, sir. It's true. I keep a record of everything I do. And also, I keep asking around. They still said, oh, you have to EFL, I talked to EFL boss, he said we have to run a power pole right to electricity, concrete power pole to your place because it's more than 400 meters. And I still wait. I go to PA here, I go to the rock to speak to the landowners. I speak to the landowners, he's still holding him. 4 months ago, I talked to this guy. They say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Hey, I can't wait around. I go around, I spend $300 on I'm getting my stick here, I go around. I climb up and go down. Sometimes I leave down there, not working. I go here. What I'm saying now, it's not only me. My friend here, other people try to do this. There's nothing happening. I'm still waiting today. Spending all that money going around. Am I helping the economy of Fiji? I'm paying the people, those people. Some weeks I get 10 people to work in the farm. It's a settlement there, big settlement there. They take that money, they buy their food. I want my daughter in the hospital, can I work for 2-3 days? Yes, come to work. They come to work. But I spend all this money and I'm still waiting here. I want to get an assistant work. That's all my question. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so you have the concession loan application. Then you have the electricity. The electricity is, what's the problem with electricity? The EFL is not connecting, or?
Yeah, we have 20 houses along the way. Two
yes.
before my land.
Yes.
Yes, the Matagal land, then my lease land.
Yes.
I want to help all these people too along the way, so they can pay all the family. Some of them, but not all of them. More than 300-400 meters, they won't run post. They will run the big power line. But I am still asking.
So who did you ask for that?
Guy in La Pasa, a penny.
The EFL there?
Yes.
Okay.
He told me to fill up the form and get the landowners, I know 60% of the landowners are supposed to sign. Yes, I know. But if I'm waiting 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this is the middle of the year. If I never do this, I'll wait for the middle of the next year. One whole year, I have to wait for 5 years or 2 years. I want to get this done. The people help the people. They pay their power. The road, I do the road myself all the way. Taxis can reach up there. In rainy time, only 4 wheels can go there.
So, and with the agriculture seeds, you're saying you want more from agriculture?
Yes.
So they gave you seeds and they gave you pineapple tops?
Pineapple top, that's all. I asked them for, when you had a research station up there, since I was a school boy, the station is still there. And I asked them, they don't have everything, a lamb, anything to plant on the farm.
So you want more seedlings?
More seedlings, and lemons, all the things I can plant. Even the bananas, mondi, all these, let me grow, sell it. What I want to do, I will set up a store on the side of the road, vegetable on the side, and do my kitchen on this side. No assistance. I talked to the FDP guy, he said, a coupon from Suba has not been, we didn't receive anything yet. So when you going to receive? Every time the minister talked on the TV, the next 2 days I go and ask them, Minister of Culture, you sir, when you spoke on the TV, how when? They say, we have to get approval from Suba. Where you get, hey, the minister said this. The Minister of Culture said this. Minister of Economy said this. That's why I come, not the land. I want to utilize the land. I want to plant ginger. I call these guys, they never say anything. End up in, Suba, in Nitasin. Like I said, it costs you $1,500 to bring in water, cook it from there or whatever they say. I want to plant ginger. I can clear the land for you. We take it all ready in plant. Still, there's nothing.
If we've got some staff there on the side, if you can, after this, leave your name and contact details, we can follow up with FDB as to what happened.
Yes.
I mean, look, there's no doubt that, maybe some branches of FDB aren't doing the right thing in terms of communicating well to you.
It's just assistance, sir, like forks, knives, chainsaw, all those things to clear the place.
So with the FDB loans, not FDB, it's not only FDB, but it's open to all the banks, the concession loan. So we can find out in terms of what happened to your application,
yes.
Why didn't you get a response. But I know FDB is disbursed already $70 million. A lot of farmers have also got money too.
I just got 15 acres here. I want to utilize the land.
Sure.
Yeah.
In respect of the consent of the landowners, you have to get it. EFL is not going to put power pole on land where you don't have consent of the landowners.
Yes, I understand, sir.
And if the landowners don't give you consent, they can't put it in. Legally, they can't.
Yes, I understand.
Because, landowners can come and take it away and say they can sue EFL. So you have to get consent. If they want to give the consent, then that's a different story altogether.
They want to do a subdivision on the same land where the power line is going to go. I say, I put the line of power there. Then you can do the subdivision. Your power is already there.
Who wants to do subdivision?
Them.
Oh, the landowners?
That's their land.
So, I mean, you have to sort that out amongst yourselves in terms of the consent of the landowners. But EFL won't do it unless you get consent.
Right.
The other FDB one, obviously, please give your name and contact details. Right. We can find out for you. And also we'll do a follow-up for agriculture.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Over here, please.
Thank you, AG. One comment and 2 questions, if I can. The comment is thank you for giving us the information on debt, because there's so much misinformation and gossip. I'm hearing that Fiji's essentially broke, it's defaulting on debt repayments, etc. And that clearly isn't the case. So that was good to hear. The 2 questions, the debt you're talking about, is that just public debt or is it public and private debt combined, where you're comparing it with the GDP? And finally, interest rates, we just sort of touched on that. Globally, they're going up a lot. I assume the loans that you've arranged are concessional or interest rates locked in for as long as you can. Thank you.
So the debt to GDP ratio, I'm talking about public debt, what we as a government owe to people who we borrow money from. You know, the example that I gave about the $100,000, this guy paying 15%, me paying 1%. We as a government have got concessional loans also. We have borrowed from the Japanese at 0.01%, 40-year term, 10-year grace period. So by the time you actually pay that money back, you only pay back 40% of what you borrowed. As you know, a dollar today is not going to be worth the same dollar in 40 years' time. Some of you are old enough to know that in your days for 5 cents you can get 10 Chinese lolly. Today you can't even get for 20 cents 1 Chinese lolly. If you build a house today, it'll be a lot cheaper to build a house today than in 10 years' time. So with loans, if you have a longer term and your interest rate is low, we borrow from the Japanese at 0.01%, 40 years to pay, 10-year grace period, we only pay back 40% of what we borrowed. We borrow from the World Bank at 0% interest rate. A service fee of 0.75%. By the time we pay them back, we only pay back about 45% or 55% what we borrowed. No, 45% what we borrowed. So that's what we've done. What we've also done, we've restructured a lot of our debts. There's some debts that were more expensive. So we've got new money to pay off the expensive debt, so now we pay low interest rates. Those are the kind of things that actually have helped us. There was a bond, global bond that was taken through the Garcia government. At that time the interest rate was very high, about over 6%. Now, every time the bonds were issued, they were simply rolled over every 5 years. So now we've actually paid the bond off, but we borrowed money from the World Bank at very cheap rates. So that's the advantage. Please, thank you. Mike, please.
Just a question, sir. It's about the priority of children's education. Since last month, up to now, there's something wrong with the school children's bus fares e-ticketing. Yes. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, no, actually, we've seen in other places too. There's some corrective measures being undertaken to make sure that that gets fixed up. There have been some issues with that. I recognize. In fact, just yesterday I was talking to some people about that. We've also, the chairman of LTA, James Sawane, he's also had a meeting yesterday with the bus companies also. For the bus companies to show some flexibility. If the tickets don't work, don't get the kids off the bus. Those are the kind of things we're working through.
Honorable Minister, thank you for the oversight of the economy in the forecast. Just on the diversification, like tourism and agriculture, we had a few discussions with some of the teams, like they're saying that the Fiji imports, like the tourism sector imports quite a lot of vegetables, fruits, and which the Fiji economy with the land availability can supply. And even vacant lands in Vanuatu that can be fully utilized to supply the agricultural products and get the foreign exchange earnings. I guess we know the problem and the solution, but it's just how to do it is the question mark that has been in people's mind.
Further, because I don't understand what you mean. We know the solution, but we don't know how to do it.
For example, the solution to substitute the import of fruits and vegetables, it can be grown in Fiji.
But not all the fruits.
Not all the fruits and vegetables, and plus increasing the agricultural exports too. It can be grown and exported, but it's not done to the maximum level. Like some of the issues they are saying that is the tenure of the lease that is stopping them to fully utilize and invest in the farms, lack of labor, on the farms, skill set and all?
There's some issues that are what we call attitudinal issues. The average age of a cane farmer today in Fiji is 59 years old. Before, for example, the cane farms, your great-grandfather was a cane farmer, the grandfather became a cane farmer, the father became a cane farmer, you became a cane farmer. Well, the young people don't want to become cane farmers. A lot of them are working as chefs, they work in the tourism sector, they want to work, they've got their mobile phones, they don't want to be cutting cane at 5 a.m. in the morning. Now we don't need enough cane cutters, we use prisoners. The prisoners get paid. We set up temporary prisons in between Tavua and Ra. So they go and cut cane. Nobody wants to cut cane. Before we used to go from Vanwalevu, or they came from Tailevu, go to the Western Division from the Esawas. Nobody wants to cut cane. So it's how people have evolved over a period of time. You are right about the leases. For Fiji, one of the problems in Fiji has been that you could lease Itauke land and crown land or state land for residential, industrial, tourism, commercial purposes for 99 years. No problem. When it came to agriculture, it was 30 years. Right. Which meant, you see, if I come and get a tourism lease on Itauke land or government land, I can use my lease and go to the bank. I may do a $20 million investment. The bank won't hesitate to lend me money because they know that their money is safe, because if I don't do the repayments, they can, as a move in the mortgage, right? They can resell it. And they know that you will be doing a business for the next 99 years. This is why, because agriculture lease only for 30 years, commercial banks never lent in the agriculture sector. That's why only going to FDB. The FDB had a lot of pressure. Very few banks lend in the agriculture sector. We used to have a National Bank of Fiji. Of course, got lost through corruption. But they used to have what they call crop lien. They used to have a crop lien, like mainly in sugar. So they'll give you money. They know that the sugar mill will pay you the money. They used to take the money at source from there. So your crop lien. So now the law has been amended. It got amended a few years ago, where now you can get Itauke land and state land or government land for agriculture purposes up to 99 years. Of course, in the Itauke land, with the consent of the landowners. They have to agree to lease it for 99 years. But there's nothing stopping them from legally leasing the land to you. So the moment you have more land for 99-year leases, you'll find the banks will want to lend you money. So you can buy a big tractor, you can buy a harvester, whatever it is. Then you get a lot more money being pumped in. A lot of business people will go in and start investing in agriculture. Because people in Fiji, for a long time, they did not see agriculture as a business. Right? You do your tete, short term. Or sugarcane farming, that's it. But agriculture needs to be seen as a business. So that's been one of the things that's been holding back. Of course, things like labor is an impact too. A lot of people, young people, don't want to work in the farming sector. It's an attitudinal issue. Same thing like in Australia. A lot of people don't want to become tradespeople in rural areas. A lot of people don't want to become teachers. It's an attitudinal thing. Society is changing. So we have to recognize that. So one of the reasons why we want everywhere in Fiji to have mobile phone connectivity, so the young people think, okay, I got Facebook, I've got my internet here, it's okay. I got electricity, so I can stay here. I got all the comforts. I can watch my movie on Netflix. So they'll make rural areas more attractive. Why do you think we're putting street lights in rural areas? This has never been done before. Now in villages you go through, we put street lights. A lot more will be done in Vanwalevu too. That's just to make those places a lot more attractive. Of course, there's a lot of safety issues around it too. But remember one thing also, it's your market. Somebody is telling me a few weeks ago, they said, oh, I'm not getting that much for my dalo. There may be a lot of people have planted dalo. You may get a lower price for it. One stage everybody wanted to plant sandalwood. Became, the fad, the in thing. The question to ask, when all the sandalwood trees are mature, will it be flooded? Will you get the right price? So a lot of people think, like the other day somebody said to me, oh, I planted this, but my price has come down. I want AMA to come and buy it. Okay, if AMA buys, what is AMA going to do with it? You can't sell it yourself. Who is AMA going to sell it to? So again, with the farming is a business, you have to be strategic about it. What are the things that are in demand? So those are the kind of things we are looking at.
Say, in regards to this, the FNFPF contribution, is there any plans for the government to increase that back to 10%?
You want it increased?
Yes,
You want it increased?
Definitely.
Yeah, sorry. Do we have that slide about the... Oh, here. So you see, just to let you know how I talked about those people who were in the, like if they're working at a hotel as a waiter or waitress and they lost their job because of COVID, they could withdraw their money from the general account, but if they ran out, we paid $225 a fortnight into the FNPF account so they could withdraw it. We paid $205 million in that way, just in the COVID period. The round one, $90, we said it's only $90 per household. I'm digressing a bit, but I'll come back to the point. $90 per household. Then we found out that some people from the same household were applying 5 times. So we stopped it. So we said, okay, $50 per person. So you have 5 people in the same household, they can all apply $50. So we paid out first on 11.2, 10.2. Then the famous 360. $106 million, $87 million. The Benua Lebu thing has started too, the $100. We paid $2 million so far. That's what we've done. And so total we paid $432 million. But of course we did things like if you're a market vendor, the market fees you don't pay. Since last year till now, we pay on your behalf. Somebody has to pay, otherwise Savusavu won't have the rates, won't have the money, right? So we pay on your behalf. If you're a taxi driver, your taxi license is expiring, you have to go and get renewed, we pay for that. You want to go to birth certificate, get a birth certificate, we pay for that. Just to help people along the way, in terms of just standing up on their own feet. Now, the reason why we reduced it from 10 to 5 was because a lot of employers said it's an extra burden on them. So slowly we increased to 6%, I'm to 6 now. Employer contributes 6%, employee contributes 6%. So we'll have to gauge the market. We don't want to lose jobs. In the same way, when the minimum wage, government doesn't decide to pull a figure out of the air. We have an expert that we bring from Australia, Dr. Patak. He comes along, he looks at the economy, sees what's the cost dynamics, what will happen. So for example, if he's a small businessman, or like you for example, you're a farmer. Now, under minimum wage, you have to pay them all $4 an hour. Minimum, right? By January of this year. Of next year, sorry, January next year. So if we said to you overnight, like in April, minimum wage $2.68. If we say to you from tomorrow you start paying $4, you say, whoa, it's too much. Maybe instead of hiring 10 people, I'll hire 5 people. So 5 people may lose their jobs. So he also has to look at that. What will be the impact on jobs? So setting the minimum wage, you have to look at everything, all the factors. And then you come up with a figure. Of course, some politicians are saying $5, $7, whatever. This is a political gimmick. But when we set the minimum wage, it's to look at how it will affect employers, affect employees. And that's how it's increased. So with FNPF also, we want to make sure that if tomorrow we increase it from 6 to 10% for the employer, that he's not going to say, well, look, my business is still not making that much money. I might as well let go of 2 people. Once the economy becomes stronger, then we can put it back up to 10%. And that's some of the things that we are assessing at the moment. That's one of the things that we do through the budget consultations. Okay. As a matter of interest, in Singapore, FNPF contribution is 32% from your wages. The employer contributes and the employee contributes. I think the employee contributes 20%. The employer contributes 12%. That's why I got high savings, very high savings.
So thank you for giving opportunity to the Honorable Minister regarding this budget consultation. And the issue I really want to raise is the increase of fuel price. And we taxi drivers are requesting to the Honorable Minister if we can get a fuel price increase, the taxi meter increase, because as we have lately increased the bus fare, so it will be better if our taxi fare can be also increased by 20 cents instead of 10 cents per 100 meters.
Anything else?
And number two, as it was announced in the March budget that the taxi open ranking system. So I request to the Honorable Minister, like these taxi permits which were applied during the first time to the rural base, they are all piled up in town, so there are no taxis in the rural to provide services. So I request if these rural taxis can be reversed to their proposed base so that public also in the rural they can have public service vehicle for their use. Because at the moment all are in town and no one is providing service in the rural. And the number of taxis we have at the moment in Savusavu, it's very fair enough. But only we need if the taxis which were in rural to provide service from rural side.
Anything else? I see you got a long piece of paper, so
No,
I'll get all of them out, then I'll respond to
Only few because I arrived late, sir. And number three was, like I said, I'm very much thankful for the Minister of Local Government. Like she said, she came here during the opening of that, the development of that hot spring, natural hot spring. And there was a public consultation call, sir. So I request if any implement or anything like that, we can have any public consultation, sir, or stakeholders consultation before any amendment is done. So after all, there won't be any question if we will having any public or stakeholders consultation before any law is amended, sir. Thank you, sir.
The first issue about the taxi fare, that's before the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission. I know some other taxi drivers throughout Fiji have requested for that, and they're currently assessing it as to how much it should increase by. Of course it will increase, no doubt, but it's done independently. It's not done by government, it's not done by LA, it's done by FCCC. I understand they may be giving the ruling next week, what I'm told. Like recently the cane harvesters, there is a price for that, $17 I understand. Now it's gone up to about $21. So they are the ones who do it. Same thing with the bus fares. It's done independently. They look at all the different, figures. They look at the fuel price increase, for example, cost of maintaining your vehicles, etc. And then they give the fare increase. So they'll be giving the ruling very soon. And then once that's done, then it becomes applicable throughout Fiji. Okay, so that's number one. You want to respond to that?
Sir, compared to VT level and Vanua level, like the fuel price which they are getting in VT level is, example, 3 cents less than
I know that, but FCCC looks at those things also. So Vanua level rates will be probably different. I mean, that's what they're going through at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So they'll have to look at that. In the same way, like I mentioned, you weren't here, I think, flour. Because of the freight cost of certain things in Vanua level in the outer islands are more. Because if it comes from there, they have to add the freight cost to it too. Like fuel.
Yes, sir.
There's a difference, right?
Yeah.
So that's taken into account.
They're charging the cartage too, and that cartage we have to pay.
Of course you have to pay for that.
Sure.
The same way if you have to, now you've got an increase in fuel, your passenger has to pay more. if you're paying more. It gets passed on.
Yes.
That's what happens, it gets passed on. So that's number one. Number two, in respect of the open bases, you are saying there's a lot of people in the rural areas that don't get serviced. Yes?
Yes, sir.
So why aren't you taking a taxi there? If you know that there are people there, why aren't you taking a taxi there? Open base means exactly that. That you don't have to drive from town. If you know that there are a lot of people near the Koro Sun Resort, go there. Nobody's stopping you. That's what open base means. And there were consultations. The open base system was announced 2 years ago. You know that. More than 2 years ago, before COVID. We announced it then. So there was widespread consultation. So don't say there was no consultations. And open-based system is the way forward in many countries. Why should you be only in one area? If you, for example, technically you'll be breaching the law if your base is here and you go and drop somebody, 10 kilometers away, and if you brought them back, you will be breaching it under the old rules, right? Because your base is here. You start from here. Open base means tomorrow if you go or you get a fare at Korosan, you can park your car there and wait for the fare. So if it would be very silly for all the taxi drivers to all come in one place. If you know that there's business there, go there. Nobody's stopping you. It's very simple. We had, for example, discussion with some taxi drivers in Lautoka. We had a meeting recently. So I know there are a lot of people who've been used to the old system. Even though there's 2 years of warning, they still want to hang on. You no longer have to pay base fees, unless you're in a private area. Before you have to pay base fees to the municipal council. Now you don't pay base fees. Of course, you go into somebody's private yard, then you pay their base fee, whatever the rate is. You don't pay any base fees. So, it may not necessarily be applicable in Savusavu, because Savusavu is a small place. We said to these taxi drivers, there is nothing stopping. If assuming all of you here are taxi drivers, individual cars, you can even form your own cooperative. You're competing with those other people there. You can have one common phone number. You call whoever's nearest, they can go there. Do you know Uber? Do you know what Uber is? Uber wanted to come to Fiji. We stopped them. We would have killed 2 people. Uber basically means I have got a private car, I can run it as a taxi. But what it means is that you have to join the company Uber. And under the Uber, you pay them a fee and you don't get cash paid. You get paid through your M-Pesa, for example, in Fiji. And, for example, if there's Uber in Fiji, if say Justin was at the Savusavu airport, he'll go on the Uber system and he'll say, okay, I want a taxi here. I want to go from here, I want to go to, what's the resort called? Custos. So whoever is the closest will ping. And immediately when they ping, Justin will see on his phone, Joseph Kitawake is coming. Car number da-da-da-da, 2 minutes away. He'll get that on his phone. And then he sees the number plate, gets on. You go to Custo, you get off the car. You'll get paid after he gets off the car. No cash. That's how it works. If I have my daughter, she's in school, I can send a taxi. I can see on my phone that my daughter has now got in the taxi, she's coming down this road, that road, and she's now on the way home. At the moment, you can't do that in Fiji. I feel safer to have somebody in an Uber car because I know where exactly my daughter is going. There is nothing stopping taxi drivers from doing that today. You can put GPS, you can put that app, doesn't have to be Uber app, you can do that. People have to evolve with times. There's a person who told me in Nandi that I do that now because that taxi driver has got all the facilities. There's a gentleman some months back, he said, I got in a taxi and the taxi driver could see that he was a foreigner, expatriate. And he usually comes to Fiji for business. And he said, he was wearing a suit. He said, I got in the taxi. He was telling me a story. He said, the taxi driver said to me, sir, do you want the air conditioning? In most taxi drivers, they don't put on the air conditioning, right, to save fuel. But he saw the guy expatriate, put up the windows, put on the aircon. And then he said to me, do you want some water? I got a small bottle of water. Then the guy got off, he gave him his business card. He said, I use the taxi 4 times in a day. I use the same guy I use all the time. Every time I come to Fiji, I use him. Customer service. People want customer service. We all have to change our business, the way we do business. The same way today, the fisherman, the Yangona farmer, he rings up and says, who gives him the best price? You don't just simply go and sit there and wait for somebody to give you the best price. That's what we need to do. We have to evolve. Some adjustments need to be made, but that's a better way forward. But if you know that on the other side where the copra factory, the mill is, there's a lot of people there, they want to be picked up, go there, park there. If you know that a lot of people at 4 o'clock get off at the copra mill, and they want a taxi, go there. Nothing's stopping you. Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, you can, if you have any ideas, any other issues you may have, please feel free to raise those issues. You can email it to us over here. And and of course, as I said, the budget will be delivered on the 15th of July, around about 7:30 to 8 p.m. in the evening. We have 1 week's break in Parliament, then we debate the budget in the last week of July itself. And the new financial year, as you know, for us, the financial year begins from the 1st of August. So whatever we announce in the budget, apart from any tariff increases, which becomes effective from midnight, the day you announce it, everything else will come into effect from the 1st of August. And it's applicable for the following year, till 31st of July. I'm not going to for your time, and I wish you all the best and have a good afternoon. Thank you. If you go to the website, by law we are required to publish this. This says the pre-election economic and fiscal update. It tells you exactly, the debt situation, tells you where we are, how we're dealing with the agencies. Most of it are presented to you, but you can also get that from the webpage too. No, it's for free from the webpage.